Class, how are you guys doing? Today I'm going to go over Unit 1 review with you guys, and this PowerPoint will match up with your guys' handouts, so if this is helpful, let me know. Before I get started, I do want to mention that my video got demonetized, the last one, for the song I used, which, as you guys know, is the Russian national anthem, or the USSR national anthem. Kind of ironic considering it is a communist anthem, but there you go. Alright, so let's get started on the Unit 1 review. So the time period that we're covering here is 1491 to 1607, and this part of the content is 5% of the exam. That's pretty low, considering that some of these other units are like 20%, but that's fine. It's still important content and it will be on the test. So let's start off with periodization. This unit's start date is 1491, and if you'll remember the old rhyme, Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. So we're talking pre-European contact. Now obviously, who's living here pre-Columbus? We got Native Americans. A bunch of different cultures, a bunch of different regions. We'll talk more about that in a second. But before Columbus gets here, we're talking pre-European contact, Native American civilizations. Now end date, 1607. That is the date of the Jamestown colony getting founded in North America and Virginia. And as you guys know, that colony is to grow tobacco. It's formed by a company, but again, we'll talk about that in the next video. Now this time period, what they are looking at is when Columbus first gets here, all the way up to when the British make their first colony. So this is Spanish, this is French, this is no Europeans, but we're talking no British here. We're just talking about the French and British and Portuguese and all those guys. Alright, so first section is politics and political parties. Now, we're not going to have political parties in this unit here because it is not America yet, so we're good on that. But we do have a political thing that is pretty important here, the Treaty of Tordesillas. This is 1494. Spain and Portugal are going to split the world, essentially. You can see it on this big map here. But what we care about is North America, okay? So the Portuguese are going to get this side of North America, and the Spanish are going to get this side. Now, obviously, the Spanish are getting the better half here, clearly. But we do see some side effects of this thing, because in Brazil, even today, they're still speaking Portuguese. And then obviously South America, Central America, they're all speaking Spanish over in this area. So do know this. It is an important political thing going on. Now next, we have foreign policy and wars. Now again, we don't have a U.S., so we don't have any foreign policy going on here, but we do have a series of wars. Now you guys remember, you may remember Cortez is going to show up to Tenochtitlan over here, and he's going to be fighting off the Aztec people. We also get the Spanish fighting the Taino. We get the Spanish fighting the Mayan. So really, war here is just all about the Spanish beating up on Native Americans. The French and the Dutch are not going to be fighting the Native Americans as much. They're more focused on trade. So that is our foreign policy and wars. Now, economy. We can break it up into pre and post contact. Pre-contact, their economies, Native Americans' economies, are based on the region's environment, okay? So if you're down here and you are in, the southwest region where you can grow maize, it's corn really well, that is going to be your economy. if you're up here in the plains region and there's a lot of buffalo and a lot of animals to track, your economy is going to be based on meat and furs and things like that, right? So it just depends on where you are. Now, if you are up here in the plains region and you have a lot of meat and furs, but you don't have a lot of corn, clearly what you're going to do is trade with these southwestern cultures. So trade is very, very expansive in this time period. We know that because we have found artifacts like these right here that were made in as low as Central America. We found them all the way up here in what is today Canada. So we know that these tribes are trading quite a bit. And that's pre-contact. Let's talk about post-contact. Really, the economy of North America, since its colonies first, is all going to be about mercantilism. This is when the colonies provide these goods for their mother country. And these mother countries, I've mentioned a few so far. We have Spain, we have Portugal, we have Britain eventually, but we have these countries who are extracting goods out of their colonies. Now, obviously, the mother country is the one who benefits, and the colonies are the ones who get screwed. We'll see that in culture here in a little bit, but it's all about mercantilism. Now, how does it look, this mercantilism, at this time? Really, it can be exemplified through our Columbian exchange, okay? Now, this is cultural and economic, but let's talk about the economic impacts first. So, new markets, all right? Europe at this time is going to start producing some of these finished goods like guns and rum and things like that, and they will be able to sell that stuff over to these Native Americans, okay? Europe is also going to get new crops. For instance, the potato is going to radically change food in Europe and how they buy food, so that is an economic impact. Now, for Native Americans, they are going to start trading a lot of furs to the Europeans for finished goods like guns and rum and things like that. So they are going to make a lot of cash, but they are going to overhunt. They're going to hunt more than they typically would, and that is going to cause a little bit of environmental issue, but the Native Americans are going to make money by trading stuff with the Europeans. So that is a little bit of economic impacts of this Columbian exchange. Now, expansion. Normally this category would be for the U.S. gaining territory. The U.S. doesn't exist, but as the U.S. does expand, we're going to run into these bad boys eventually. So it is important to note, Spain has a whole bunch of this western territory, right? And France is going to have a lot of the central United States. So as America starts to expand here, I know it doesn't exist yet at our time period, but when we do start to exist and we start to take land, it's important to note we're going to run into the French and we're going to run into Spain. And we can't forget little Spanish Florida down here as well. So that's important to note. Now, Native Americans, obviously a very important part of this unit. Some examples you should know. The Pueblo Native Americans, they're over here in the southwestern part of the United States. These guys are semi-urban, which is kind of interesting. Usually we don't think of Native Americans as being urban at all, but these guys are. I'll show you an example of that in a second. And, like I've mentioned, they're farmers, okay? They're planting maize and squash and things like that down here, and they're selling it to other Native Americans. Our next example is the Sioux. Okay, the Sioux are up here in the plains, Great Plains Native Americans, and they are nomadic, meaning that they're traveling around to get their food. Another one, northeast, we have Iroquois. They're kind of neat because they're a mix between farming and nomadic lifestyle, so they're kind of a unique civilization there. And then we have the mound builders. Okay, these guys are southeastern in the Mississippi region. They are a group of tribes, but they're important to note because they were a powerful civilization. We know that because we have seen those mounds that they have built. For example, this is an artist's rendition of those mounds. Here we see the Pueblo Native Americans in their semi-urban environment, right? This is carved into cliffs, which is very cool. And then here we see the Sioux with their teepees and their nomadic lifestyle. So you can see the different scale of, I guess, nomadic to urban with these natives. Now, pre-contact examples, continuing on. What happened to these Native Americans, okay? 90% of these guys are going to die from smallpox. You can see this is a chart of the population of Mexico, natives in Mexico here, and you can see smallpox is introduced, and boom, these guys are going to start dying, okay? Now, why do the Native Americans not have immunity? It's because they have not had domesticated animals like Europeans have. So the Europeans are used to these kind of nasty diseases. The natives are not. So it wipes out huge chunks of their population, which is very devastating. It's also important to note that they are being civilized, in quotes, by Europeans. So Europeans feel that the Native Americans are benefiting from being in contact with the Europeans, that it's a good thing, so we get to see that kind of interplay between Europeans and these Native Americans. Okay? Now, women, our next category, pre-contact. A lot of tribes are actually going to have female chiefs, which is very cool. Women, oftentimes in these, especially the plains hunter-gatherer type tribes, women are at home with the kids. They are harvesting berries or crops or whatever. They kind of know what's going on with the tribe, whereas men are out there hunting, they're getting hurt, they're dying. So women are really the ones that are going to step up and lead some tribes, which is neat. Not happening in Europe, right? Now, post-contact, the French, the Dutch, not so much the British. The British bring families, but the French and Dutch and Spanish bring almost no women with them, meaning that these men who arrive have to find women somewhere, and they're going to find it with the Native Americans. So the French, the Spanish, the Dutch, they are going to intermarry with Native American women. That's going to be very, very common. So post-contact, we have a lot of intermarrying. Not with British, though. They do not. Now, African Americans, they are going to be used as slaves by the Spanish extensively. We know this because when you look at the number of slaves leaving Africa, there's very few going to Europe. There's very few going to North America, but there is a ton, the vast majority, going to Spanish and Portuguese South America. But Spain is famous for abusing African Americans, very harsh slave conditions, very, very common here in these Spanish territories. Now, immigrants, foreigners, obviously, our first immigrants we're going to have is the what will become the Native Americans 13,000 years ago. Some say 15,000, but just know it's in the tens of thousands. They're going to come over on this Bering Land Strait over here from Asia, and they're going to cross when the water levels were receded, and they can just kind of walk across here, and they'll populate all of North and South America. Now, the next people to show up in Americas, they are Europeans, okay? They're seeking gold, slaves. They want to spread their religion, which is Catholicism. They want to gain power from getting as much territory as they can. The first dudes to do that are the Spanish. They're going to do this by establishing what they call the encomienda system. Now, the colonists, meaning the Spanish, are going to get some land. They're going to get some Native Americans, And the idea is that they're going to care for these natives, they're going to Christianize them, they're going to show them the ways of Jesus. But what really happens is they are just going to use these Native Americans as slaves. Okay, so that is the Encomida system. Very, very brutal on the Native Americans, and we'll see some resistance to that as well. Now, they want to convert the natives to Catholicism. The Native Americans don't have much of an interest in that, but the Spanish are going to try their best to get these natives to be Catholics. And again, we get these mixed races, right? So the Spanish are here for a long time. They have no Spanish women, so they have to intermarry with the Native Americans. So we get mestizos, which are Native American and white, and we get mulatto, which are black and white mixed race people here in the Spanish Empire. Now, these mixed races don't have the same rights as other people in Spanish Empire, right? We have these guys, the Peninsulares, which are like the top dudes born in Spain, and then we have Spanish people born in New Spain, and then we have mixed races, Native Americans, and at the bottom we have those African slaves. Okay. Now French, they're a different story. They show up a little later. They ship a lot less people over, and they are really here to trade with the natives. Okay, that's all they want to do. And as a consequence, they're going to get pretty popular with the natives. They are not looked at like the Spanish or the English, who are much meaner, much more violent to the natives. So the French are there to trade. The Dutch, similar kind of deal, really. They just want to trade, make some cash, and they're going to intermarry. So will the Spanish, obviously, with the natives. So a little different than the British. Now, it's important to remember, with technology, culture, reform, culture especially, natives are very, very diverse, okay? It's kind of easy to look at old westerns or something and pin all the natives with teepees and kind of be kind of cornhole them in that situation. But they are very diverse, urban, like I said, agricultural, all based on the region's environment, okay? Whatever they have to work with in the environment. Now, religion, these guys are not Catholics, okay? Their religion is all based on nature, right? They have this belief called animalism. That's the belief that everything has a spirit. Obviously, if you are a Christian, you believe that just human beings have spirits, but natives are much more holistic. These religions, these old religions, and they believe that that everything has a spirit, animals, trees, everything, right? So that is animalism. Now, crops, what are these guys eating? They have maize, right? They have extensive farms, irrigation, all that stuff to grow corn. They got beans, squash, potatoes. So they are not all nomadic. There is a lot of agriculture there as well. Post-contact, like I said, right, this Columbian exchange. These guys are going to get diseases like smallpox. They'll get new foods even, like pork and beef. They'll get ideas, Christianity, Catholicism, property rights. They'll get new ideas from Europe. They'll get animals, including horses, which is going to radically change how, especially the Plains Indians, how they operate, how they interact with each other. So they do, their cultures do change due to Columbian exchange. Now, federal government doesn't exist, so there is a NA for this section, for this unit. It doesn't exist yet, right? So at this time, all we have really is Jamestown. We got the Spanish down here, the French are messing around up here, but that is it, right? So not really, no such thing as a federal government yet. But let's kick down to the summary, right? What are the turning points of our unit? Number 1, 1492, Columbus sails the ocean blue. Very, very important for this unit. It is kind of the start date. Next Is St. Augustine the first Spanish settlement? That might be something important to know. So that's 1565 down here in Florida. Then founding of Jamestown, 1607. Very, very important as well. So these are the three big turning points. Other units are obviously going to have a much more extensive list, but for us, this is good, okay? Now, oh yeah, another one. I know this is outside of the unit, but it's important to note the Pueblo Revolt, okay? Now this happened when the Spanish over in the southwest region are going to force Catholicism on the Pueblo tribe. And this tribe is going to revolt in a big way, right? They're going to burn down all the Catholic churches, all the crosses. They're going to kill a whole bunch of Spanish guys. And it's kind of successful, right? The Spanish leave, they abandon the Pueblo natives for a time being. They will come back and heavily put down the rebellion. They're going to slaughter thousands of Native Americans. But this is important to remember because natives are resisting, okay? It's not like the natives are rolling on their backs and accepting all this. This is a good example of Native Americans resisting these changes. Now, subperiods, again, other units are going to have way more subperiods than this one, but we can break it into two. Pre-European contact, so this is kind of Native Americans untouched by Europe and the colonists, and then we have post-contact, 1492 to present, so those are our two periods. Now, change and continuity. What's changing in this unit? What is staying the same? First off, change. Native Americans are going to start losing power, okay? They're going to start losing their culture. They're going to lose a massive 90% of Native Americans are going to die due to disease. So natives are very much affected. And really, we lose a lot of culture, a lot of history in this process. You can think the Spanish burning all the Aztec documents they had and artifacts because they weren't Christian. So Native Americans are going to lose a lot in this time period. Now Europeans are going to gain a lot. They're going to get a lot of money, right? They're going to extract not so much gold, but they're going to get silver. They're going to get they're going to try to bring slaves over to Europe, but they do get a lot of good crops. They're going to get a lot of money off tobacco, things like that. So Europeans are going to get a lot of land, power, money from this unit, okay? Now, what stays continuous? Still, many tribes are remaining sovereign. So we have a little bit of tribes getting shut down over here. We'll talk about that next unit. We have the Pueblo Indians, like I was talking about here, getting shut down. But a lot of these Native Americans, Yurok-Tolowa included, are staying pretty sovereign, really. They know the Europeans are here by word of mouth, but they're not contacting them yet. Okay, so these tribes are still very sovereign. They're independent. That will change, but for now, it stays the same. Okay. So, last thing you're supposed to do, characterize this unit. Okay. What would you name this period? How would you characterize it in U.S. history? That is for you guys to decide. I recommend maybe doing 5 sentences down there, something like that, but I hope this helps you guys out a little bit with the unit review. Let me know if you want me to post one for Unit 2. I hope you guys are staying happy and healthy. I will see you in the next one.